There are a lot of people who have a lot of ire for game publishers. From separating the game out into too much DLC to microtransactions, people have a lot to complain about with the business end of video games. But since customers hate all this stuff so much, why not just move away from publishers? What do developers get out of it? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx we ask the question, why do video game developers need publishers? So I want to say that right off, I'm not really for the current state of game publishing. I don't like it, but we do live in an economic system that doesn't just inherently inform everybody about everything going on. Marketing, while scummy a lot of the time, is an utter necessity in order to sell a game, and that's exactly where we're going to start talking about why a developer needs a publisher. Do you know how many video games get published every year? Okay, well, neither do I. I do know that there's a constant barrage of video games on every single platform that makes it impossible to keep up with. That's partly a good thing, partly a bad thing, but it also means that a developer has a lot to compete with just to get a game in front of your face. Part of the intent of marketing is getting customers to understand what they're getting and also getting it in front of them. Now, not all game publishers know exactly what they're doing with marketing, but a good marketing team can do a hell of a lot for a game. But a good marketing team does not come cheap. Marketing can be very, very expensive, especially if you have a game that cost a lot of money to make and, in theory, needs a mass market response. Developing video games is not cheap. There's always a big looming game with some sort of amazing, huge world in it, and ideas and features and cinematics and things that just cost lots of money. They cost lots of money because they take lots of labor. On top of that, historically speaking, games used to be distributed physically, at least more. I mean, they still are, but it's mainly Amazon, and Amazon stocks things differently than Walmart. Marketing is easily the most important function of a publisher in today's world. Depending on the type of game, though, it may not be its only function. An indie game that's 2D and doesn't require a ton of specialized labor on many different modules of a game might kickstart their game, or the people developing it might do it on their free time. But in order to make a large-scale, quote-unquote AAA game, you're going to need a lot more money. A publisher might also provide that money. A budget for a game can make a huge difference depending on what kind of game you're trying to make, and if it is something like a AAA game, it might be the difference between a good game and a forgettable, mediocre game. Having the money to pay people to take the time to do the work right makes a big difference. Now, there are other aspects of game publishing, including distribution, but that is changing rapidly, and manufacturing, which my guess is that physically they have to manufacture significantly less games to make the same kind of money now because they're selling games with the same prices despite them being digital downloads and not costing any money to physically produce. Those things are definitely secondary to development and marketing now, and I'd argue that the main functions of a publisher are to facilitate development and market the game. Now here, in my opinion, is where some things start to get interesting. Marketing is not the same thing that it was when television was our main medium. Back in the 1990s, there were Sega Genesis commercials, for instance, telling us, "Welcome to the next level," and we'd see them all the time in between cartoon commercial breaks or other things. But nowadays, you don't see that as much. You see more viral marketing campaigns because, well, they deliver serious results and cost significantly less. In fact, a savvy individual could have a more viable marketing campaign through viral marketing than a massive corporation spending lots of money and not sounding organic. And this creates the question, is it really that necessary? And I'd argue that currently, at this point in time, despite the fact that I don't like it and we'll go into exactly why, certain projects are just never going to be able to succeed without massive corporate backing. The position that puts a developer in is dependence on a publisher. And if you're dependent on a publisher has power over you. And if a publisher has power over you, all they have to do is say, well, in order for you to put this game out, in order for you to reach that mass market, in order for you to have access to our resources and connections, in order to make sure that your game is reviewed, in order to make sure that there's advertising putting it in front of people's faces, in order to essentially make this all possible, we're gonna need you to make some DLC. That's the business model that works right now. And even worse, a publisher ultimately has final say over the content, whereas the actual creative elements of the team don't. The director, the person, directing the game, does not have final say.
So you want us to pay for a Wasteland sequel? Did you do Angry Birds? Will this be like it?
It's a completely different genre. It's a role-playing game.
Is it a billion-dollar franchise?
Probably not.
Then I can't help you.
It's not dissimilar from the film industry. You might think a director's artistic vision is where the buck stops, but it does not. A film distribution company ultimately has the final say. And this is a dichotomy that creates kind of a friction between the creative elements and the business elements of a game. And here's the thing, there's a ton of publishers that don't operate in that sort of way. However, the capability is there. Whether it is acted upon, the developer is in a power dynamic in which the publisher has control. So when you start creating a game, you have to weigh the ideas, the pros, the cons, what could happen to the game if you develop independently or with a games publisher. In a lot of cases, and I mean a lot, there are people who say, you know what, it would just be better to do it independently. For instance, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is one of these examples of a fantastic game. It is very much on the level of a AAA game, and the developer, Ninja Theory, acted as a publisher. It retained all of the power over itself, and I think that the game benefits tremendously from this dynamic. Creative choices were made and then, done. They just did them. I mean, granted, is it a $60 game? No, but it's priced right, and it's a great game. Also, oddly enough, didn't have anything shoehorned into it in the last minute, and as such, seems to be tested and pretty bug-free. Weird. Which then leads to the question, are game publishers ruining the video game industry? They're kind of left behind as far as the distribution model. Is it really that necessary? And the thing is, because of how everything is right now, they kind of still are. This isn't an endorsement of publishers by any means, but our system works in a way that the voice with the most money behind it is the most obvious voice. If that voice is a game developer, then it's the game developer whose games are most easy to see, the most visible, and the most visible is the most likely to be bought, assuming it looks decent. And you could say, well, there are games that are much, much better that are much smaller, and that's true. You're 100% right. Those games don't become worse, it's just they become less marketed. I don't know that this is going to be the situation forever. Things are changing very fast, like I said, especially in the distribution methods, but there is most certainly still a dependence on publishers. I don't want to savage the publishers in any way because they are a necessary part of you and I enjoying a lot of games that probably we wouldn't have even known about if they weren't published by somebody. But I also think that the business is creating a certain staleness, and people are always going to want something new and fresh. But how and when we move into a different situation, I do not know. I just know that if you can make a game like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice and not have a publisher, yeah, you probably have some money on reserve in the background, and that's putting you at an advantage to a lot of other indie developers, but still, if you can, please do. If that actually ends game publishers or gets them to smarten up a little bit, that would be great. I would like that a lot. What do you think? If you have any insight in the situation, leave us a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.